Pay attention to this security camera footage. The timestamp in the upper corner reads October 24th, 11:14 in the morning. The location is a pristine residential driveway in an affluent suburban neighborhood. The camera, mounted above a two-car garage, captures a scene of absolute frantic desperation. Two paramedics are on their knees on the hard concrete. Between them, a woman lies completely motionless. One paramedic is performing rapid, heavy chest compressions, his shoulders putting his entire body weight into the effort. The other is working desperately to manage her airway with a resuscitation bag. They are working fast. They are working hard. But standing just a few feet away is a man. He is watching them, but he is not moving closer. He takes a single step forward, then stops. He runs his hands through his hair, says something to the paramedics, and then takes a step back. One of the paramedics doesn't even look up. That man standing in the driveway is the woman's husband. His name is Julian. The woman on the ground, whose life is rapidly slipping away, is Evelyn. By the time the ambulance finally leaves that driveway, Evelyn will be gone. The initial responding officers will rule her death an acute drug toxicity, a tragic overdose consistent with her history of depression and her prescribed medication. Case closed. But the case will not stay closed, because what this camera captured and what the paramedics felt in their gut was not a tragic accident. It was the final act of a meticulous, cold-blooded murder. To understand how Evelyn ended up lifeless on her own driveway, we have to understand the man who stood over her and the terrifying, invisible prison he built around her. Evelyn was 34 years old. She had grown up in a highly unstable household, moving from town to town, learning very early on that the safest way to survive chaos was to make herself small, quiet, and completely unnoticeable. That quietness was often mistaken for shyness, but it wasn't passivity. It was a deep, ingrained vigilance. By the time she moved to the city in her 20s, she craved nothing more than stability. She worked in the accounts department of a property management firm. She was reliable, incredibly precise, and kept entirely to herself. In 2019, Evelyn's quiet world was entirely upended when she met Julian at a corporate event. Julian was a successful, 40-year-old civil engineer who owned his own consultancy firm. He was not a loud or flashy man. Instead, he was methodical, articulate, and possessed a terrifyingly effective ability to make the person he was speaking to feel like they were the center of the universe. He pursued Evelyn with a calm, relentless deliberateness. Within 4 months of dating, Julian gently suggested she leave her job at the property management firm. He told her she was too stressed, that she didn't need to work, that he would take care of everything. He used the word worry constantly. Don't worry about the bills, let me handle it. Don't worry about your car, I'll fix it. Evelyn, who had spent her entire life worrying about survival, finally let her guard down. She quit her job. They were married in a small, quiet ceremony the following year. Nora was not invited to the wedding. Julian had met Nora only once, briefly, at a dinner, and had calmly told Evelyn afterward that he found her friend exhausting and too loud. Evelyn, eager to keep the peace in her new stable life, didn't argue. When Evelyn moved into Julian's large, immaculate suburban home, she understood without being explicitly told that certain spaces belonged entirely to him. His second-floor study was off-limits, and the detached wooden shed at the very back of the garden, the one with the heavy padlock, was absolutely forbidden. Julian told her there was no reason for her to ever go in there. Evelyn understood the unspoken threat beneath the calm request. By the summer of 2021, just over a year into the marriage, Evelyn's entire support system had been systematically dismantled. Her visits with Nora became infrequent, then stopped entirely. Nora would text asking to get coffee, and Evelyn would reply with brief, polite excuses about being too tired or having plans with Julian. Nora assumed that her friend had simply drifted away into a new, busy married life. She didn't realize that Julian was quietly, masterfully orchestrating Evelyn's absolute isolation. He did it without screaming, without violence, and without drama. It was the work of a predator who understood that isolation is only permanent when the victim doesn't even realize the cage doors are being locked. Soon, Evelyn's only contacts with the outside world were Julian, the grocery store clerks, and her doctor. Evelyn had been struggling with insomnia and a growing sense of despair. Julian accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, sitting in the corner of the room, nodding sympathetically while the doctor prescribed her a mild, daily antidepressant. Julian took charge of the medication immediately. He kept the bottle. He handed her the single pill every morning. But in the spring of 2022, the quiet vigilance that had defined Evelyn's childhood suddenly woke up. It is impossible to know exactly what sparked it, perhaps a misplaced receipt, an odd phone call, or simply the suffocating weight of her reality, but Evelyn realized she was in extreme danger. Because Julian monitored her laptop and controlled their home Wi-Fi, Evelyn did the only thing she could think of. She opened the messaging app on her smartphone and started a private chat with herself. She used it as a secret, time-stamped diary to document what she was seeing. In March, she typed that Julian had been receiving calls late at night and leaving the room to answer them. She noted he had changed all his passwords. In April, she documented a terrifying realization. She had tried to call Nora from her cell phone, and the call immediately dropped. She tried again, it dropped again. She then used Julian's landline, and it connected perfectly. Julian had somehow blocked Nora's number from Evelyn's device. "I think he did something to my phone," she typed in the dark. "I don't know what to do." In May, the entries grew more desperate. She wrote that Julian was spending hours in the locked wooden shed at the back of the garden at bizarre times, late at night, or at 4 in the morning before the sun rose. She noted he had installed a heavy new deadbolt on the shed door. In June, Evelyn gathered a terrifying amount of courage. Under the pretext of a quick run to the grocery store, she drove to a completely different neighborhood, parked outside a coffee shop, and used a public payphone to call Nora. Nora answered, thrilled to finally hear her friend's voice. But Evelyn spoke in rushed, terrified whispers. She told Nora that she was not well, and that she needed her to remember one specific thing. "There is a wooden shed at the back of our garden," Evelyn told her. "If something happens to me, you have to tell the police about the shed. Tell them Julian never let me go in there." When a confused and panicked Nora asked what she meant by "if something happens," Evelyn simply replied, "I don't know yet. Just remember the shed." She hung up. Nora sat in her house for hours, deeply unsettled, assuming Evelyn was having a severe mental health crisis. Through the sweltering summer of 2022, Evelyn's private digital diary revealed a woman slowly being poisoned. She began documenting unexplainable symptoms, severe dizziness, bouts of extreme nausea, and a terrifying heaviness in her limbs that left her unable to get out of bed. Julian told her it was just her depression worsening, and he continued handing her her daily pill. But Evelyn researched her symptoms using a private browser. She typed into her secret chat, "I looked up what happens if you take too much of my prescription. It doesn't match. Then I looked up what happens if something else is added." She typed out the name of a highly potent, restricted veterinary sedative. She wrote down its effects. "This matches," she typed. Her final entry on that day read, "I don't think I'm going to be able to get out of here. I hope someone finds this." What Evelyn didn't know was that in January of that year, Julian had secretly taken out a massive life insurance policy on her, valued at over $1.3 million. She also didn't know that Julian had purchased a prepaid burner phone in cash from a gas station 2 towns over. Using encrypted messaging apps on that hidden device, Julian had reached out to a dark web supplier. He had purchased a lethal quantity of an odorless, fast-acting sedative, the exact compound Evelyn had suspected. He had the vial shipped to a fake P.O. box, picked it up, and locked it inside the wooden shed at the back of the garden. On October 21st, 3 days before her death, Evelyn made her final entry in her secret chat. "He's been in the shed every single day this week. Something is different. He's being very kind to me. He made dinner twice. When Julian is kind, it means he has finally decided something. I'm scared." This brings us to the morning of October 24th and back to the chilling security camera footage. At 11:09 a.m., Julian called 911. His voice was calm, but laced with a perfectly calculated edge of panic. He told the dispatcher he had found his wife unresponsive in the kitchen, adding quickly that she had a long history of severe depression and was on heavy medication. During the 4-minute call, he made sure to use the word worried 11 times. When the 2 paramedics arrived at 11:14 a.m., they rushed into the house to find Evelyn on the floor. They immediately moved her out to the flat concrete of the driveway to have enough space to work, directly under the lens of the security camera. For 14 years, the lead paramedic had worked in emergency services. He had seen every type of human tragedy, every variation of grief, shock, and horror a spouse displays when their partner is dying. But as he violently compressed Evelyn's chest, trying to force her heart to beat, he noticed the man standing in the driveway. Julian didn't rush to his wife's side. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't drop to his knees in the dirt. He stood exactly 8 feet away. When the paramedic barked a question asking how long she had been unconscious, Julian gave 3 different contradictory answers in the span of 90 seconds. He then smoothly offered up the name of Evelyn's prescribed antidepressant, planting the seed of an overdose. But the detail that chilled the paramedic to the bone, the detail he could not stop thinking about, was what Julian said next. As his wife lay dying on the concrete, Julian looked toward the street and quietly asked the paramedics if the neighbors could see them. "I don't want people talking," he murmured. The paramedic realized in that horrifying instant that Julian wasn't experiencing a tragedy. He was managing a crime scene. Evelyn was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. The local police department took one look at her medical history, the presence of antidepressants in her system, and Julian's perfectly constructed narrative of a depressed, struggling wife. They prepared to close the case as a tragic suicide by overdose. But Yet, the lead paramedic couldn't sleep. The image of the husband worrying about the neighbors while his wife was taking her last breath haunted him. Violating protocol, the paramedic personally called the lead detective on his personal cell phone. He told him to pause the closure of the case. He told the detective to look at the CCTV footage again, to look at the husband's body language, and to realize that they were looking at a performance. The detective quietly reopened the investigation. He ordered a massive, supplemental toxicology sweep on Evelyn's blood, looking for things outside of standard pharmaceuticals. And then he found Nora's name in Evelyn's old employment files and called her. Nora had been sitting in silence for days, devastated by the news of the suicide. The supplemental toxicology report came back the next day. Evelyn hadn't overdosed on her antidepressants. Her system was flooded with the exact, untraceable animal sedative Julian had purchased. But the final, most devastating piece of evidence didn't come from the shed. It came from Evelyn herself. When investigators searched the house, they took Evelyn's personal smartphone. They found the private chat. In a silent, packed courtroom months later, the prosecution projected Evelyn's secret diary onto a massive screen. The jury read her desperate, time-stamped words. They read how she documented the isolation, the blocked phone calls, the trips to the shed, and the physical symptoms of her own slow poisoning. Evelyn had known exactly what was happening to her, and even though she couldn't escape the house, she made absolutely sure her murderer would not escape justice. Julian's defense crumbled instantly. His internet search history from the night before the murder revealed queries on how to mask a sedative overdose and Louisiana life insurance payout laws. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a verdict of guilty for first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The multi-million-dollar life insurance policy was voided, but Nora, who sat in the gallery every single day of the trial, didn't care about the money. When the guilty verdict was read, she didn't cheer or cry. She simply closed her eyes, stood up, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. Evelyn had spent her life making herself quiet and small to survive. In the end, it was her quiet, methodical record-keeping and a friend who refused to forget that spoke louder than the man who tried to silence her forever.